Recently I've made a video about variety of Unobtainium species and you guys seem to like it. So tonight I propose to go even further, to break through the decor of science fiction and wander into the harsh realm of real science, to finally answer the question, which of these shinies could be for real? One of the most common answers you get when you start looking for real-life Unobtainium is something called room temperature superconductors. Unobtainium from Avatar was known to be exactly that, a type of room temperature superconductor. So what are those? Are they real? Well, maybe. Conductor is a material that electricity flows through, and most conductors resist that flow to some degree, slowing and eventually killing it. Superconductor is a material with zero electrical resistance, through which electrons can flow freely and basically forever if you close a piece of superconductor into a loop. Superconductors surely qualify as Energium, since they would revolutionize both transportation and production of electricity. They are perfect for making wires, as well as they could make nuclear fusion one step closer to happening. Superconductors would partially qualify as Transportalium, since they could give us levitation. This one is not that new, we already have maglev trains, but having another tech for that would be neat. Most importantly, perhaps, superconductors would make up for perfect digitronium. They can be used for ultra-fast and efficient circuitry, as well as in producing quantum computer building blocks, qubits. It is generally safe to say that superconductors would revolutionize our digital world beyond recognition. Superconductors do actually exist in real life. We've made and tested them. We actually use them in MRI scanners that are nowadays found in most big hospitals. And there's plenty of other known examples. But there is one problem. All known superconductors require very specific conditions to do the trick. Some of them superconduct at an immense pressure, but most do it when it's cold. Like much colder than it ever gets on Earth in nature. Like liquid helium cold, very close to the absolute zero. That kinda sets some serious limitations on practical applications of superconductors. If you have to build a high-tech pressurized fridge around where you want to use them, you will probably replace them with something not so whimsical at the first opportunity. Not all hope is lost, however. Have a look at the timeline of superconductor research. It's hard to miss the tendency. We are getting better at making them resistant to heat, and there are very good reasons to suspect that sooner or later we might find the one true material that fits the description. It's not yet ultimately clear whether it's really possible to create them or not, but chances look good enough for me to place room temperature superconductors into at least tungsten, and if I'm being optimistic, maybe even higher in Ruby tier of Sci-Fi hardness. That's where it takes Energium and digitronium, as well as hovering Transportalium variety. Oh yeah, in case you are unfamiliar with my Sci-Fi hardness tier list, basically the higher the tier, the more serious the science, and the higher are the chances that it might happen soon, or maybe is already happening. It goes as diamond, ruby, tungsten, quartz, iron and glass, aluminum, rubber, wax and cake. Tonight I'm gonna use this scale to rate the probability of Unobtainiums to exist, and thus the degree of their hardness in science fiction. The next substance on my real-life Unobtainium candidate list is Antimatter. Antimatter has that ability to self-annihilate on contact with any regular matter, producing large amounts of energy. That makes antimatter an amazing fuel, but at the same time it can be much worse than nukes, which, according to my Unobtainium taxonomy, qualifies as Energium and Destructium. Antimatter can be used in spaceship engines, but it's not really Transportalium, since even in space it's basically very efficient fuel, not some convoluted spacetime bending essence. Good news about antimatter is that we know for sure that it exists. We first synthesized it in 1995 and learned a lot since then. That places antimatter into diamond tier, and there go Destructium and Energium as well. The key problem to antimatter is storage and handling. We still haven't really figured how to contain and manipulate it in the world where most stuff is made out of regular matter. For now, we can deal with it through a complex combination of electric and magnetic fields, high vacuum and lasers, but in minuscule amounts only. This problem might one day get solved, so if you wanna go for really hard science fiction with some Energium and Destructium type Unobtainium, you want antimatter manipulation. Modern science actually has no shortage in supply of powerful unique materials that can produce energy or bring death and are either yet to be discovered or are already known to exist but are too expensive to get. On the energy side, we have, for example, helium-3, which would be main fuel for nuclear fusion reactors if we ever happen to have them after all. Helium-3 is really hard to find on Earth, but luckily it got deposited in huge quantities on the surface of the Moon from the millennia of solar wind. One of my most favorite hard sci-fi movies of all times is Moon, wonderfully performed by Sam Rockwell almost all alone, and it's exactly about mining helium-3 in some nearby future. Speaking of real-life destruction species, we have no shortage here either, in the sheer multitude of ways that our civilization hopefully decided not to go to for now, like chemical, biological and nuclear weapons. However, it is not just weapons that science provides, there is hope in terms of defense too. If you want real-life durabilium, you are in a very good spot these days, since there are plenty of them known already, like graphene, borazon or carbon nanotubes, and a lot more are expected to get discovered in future. It's worth noting that the most advanced species of real-life durabiliums require high-tech labs to manufacture rather than mines to get extracted from. Sure, there are still rare earth metals and there are unique super-heavy elements that might exist somewhere out there in space and might require mining, but it seems that the general trend of evolution for durabilium-type unobtainium is going from inorganic naturally occurring into organic and inorganic synthetic. As of scientific possibility, well, without doubt, durabilium is diamond tier. Things get more complicated when we get to the other ancient unobtainium variety, the Immortalium. It's hard to deny that our medicine has gone a long way in terms of healing, regeneration, anti-aging, and even resurrection. However, there is no specific substance that could do it all. Quite the opposite, modern medicine is a very complex set of different substances, devices, methods, and specialists, and cannot be possibly reduced to some glowy magic liquid. Sure, there are miracles that you can do with stem cells and gene engineering. We have CRISPR, thus we can crisp the DNA. And it's now and for real, it is already happening these days. But it is quite costly and has its limitations. Human organism is a very complex structure that is not entirely understood even despite our modern technological advancements. What we know for sure is that there is a lot of difference between, say, healing a stab wound, healing asthma, healing tuberculosis, healing cancer, healing AIDS, healing amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, healing aging, and healing death. And the substances that are, or will be capable of all these miracles, differ wildly in what they are and how they work. Because of that, I assume it's safe to say that the broader is the spectrum of miraculous restoring and protective functions of Immortalium, the lower are the chances of its actual existence. Will we have better medicine in the future? Absolutely yes, we will. Will it come in the shape of one single substance capable of healing us from everything forever? Sorry, but I very much doubt that. Instead, we will probably get a complex system of not-so-powerful sub-immortaliums, each somewhat limited in spectrum of healing abilities, but doing its special thing to perfection. Almost all of them can easily exist in diamond tier, as long as they play by real biology rules. One curious example of Immortalium is demonstrated by 2011 science fiction movie In Time. People in this version of future are genetically engineered against aging and disease. They are kinda born with Immortalium in their blood. But the real Immortalium of the story is time, which everyone has sticking on his forearm. It can be earned like money, and it can run out, and then you just die. Genetic engineering against health problems might happen in maybe even not so remote future, as soon as we deal with ethics of the subject, and it can gradually progress to deny immortality, which is where you will have to somehow deal with overpopulation. In Time is maybe not the best science fiction movie I ever saw, but it sure explores an interesting idea, and quite a possible one, up to Ruby or maybe even Diamond tier. Speaking of crisping and playing with DNA, we might as well have a look at one other type of unobtainium, Mutatium. So, is it possible to transform living organism? Oh yeah, it is indeed, and in many different ways. But usually it is not what happens after exposure to heavy radiation, toxic chemicals, electrocution, venomous insect bites, and the such. All those things kinda tend to cause mutations in real life, that's true, but not the fun type of mutations, rather more like cancer type and sudden death type. If you look for the most probable positive mutatium-type substance, it would very likely be organic and synthetic, carefully designed for a specific use on a specific organism. In other words, we are back to CRISPing technologies, and the real-life mutatium will probably look like a syringe of genome-transporting viruses. But we stumble upon a problem here: the delivery of that DNA-crisped mutatium to all of the cells of organism. Sure, we can build a virus vector for that, but some cells live in remote places of the body, some are very aggressive to foreign-looking genetic material, and some are nigh impermeable for it. The optimal way to introduce new genetic material would be in the very beginning of life, or even before it begins. We can technically do it, but the problem is that we cannot predict all the possible crisp outcomes good enough, so there are plenty of risks, and it's not even speaking of all the ethical questions that arise. In teenage and adult life forms, bodily changes from mutatium can be partial at best. You cannot grow extra limbs and new organs, and the whole process of transformation is likely to wreak havoc on the entire organism for quite a while. Real-life mutated organism cannot magically increase in size, gaining mass from nowhere. Shapeshifting, if it's gonna happen seriously, is going to take weeks, months, or even years, not a pathetic second. Mutatium we generally see in movies these days tends to be on the weaker side, more often than not below the iron and glass line, but it can reach the diamond tier as well, if played smartly. Speaking of the other diamond tier organism-related Unobtainium, we have Antagonium subtype, which counteracts properties and powers of some organism, object or process. Allergic reactions are common in most multicellular life forms that have at least somewhat advanced immune system. Besides allergens, there are many other factors that can weaken or harm some organisms while leaving others completely intact. The most popular example of Antagonium, the kryptonite, is usually depicted as some sort of radiation-poisoned shards of what's left from Superman's homeland, and I find that origin story to be kinda believable. Kryptonite can be a very toxic industrial waste product of a late Kryptonian civilization, or it can be a biological weapon constructed on Krypton with an aim to harm Kryptonian life forms specifically in some high-tech military instability phase of planetary history, and both those options would kinda explain it to me. But more on that later, since I gonna review Kryptonite in more detail in the third and the last episode of this short series on Unobtainium. In there, I'm gonna compare the scientific hardness of kryptonite with a bunch of other notorious unobtainium varieties, and if you don't wanna miss it, consider subscribing. As of now, there is totally diamond tier possibility for powerful antagonists to exist, both on cellular level, on chemical level, on atomic level, and in quantum level events. For every electron there can always be positron, for every acid there is base, for every poison there can be an antidote. But if Antagonium really wants to be diamond tier, it has to be designed carefully to logically fit what, why, and how it antagonizes. Moving on, next we have psionium, the substance that either gives you telepathy, telekinesis, foresight and other mystical mental powers, or in some way acts against your mind, like drives you into madness, or makes you obediently do what you are told, or stops you from telling lies. On that harmful side, psionium actually does quite good in terms of realism. Our civilization has already discovered quite a lot of powerful psychotropic substances that can cripple and/or modify human psyche in many unthinkable ways. Negative psionium thus easily earns diamond tier, but things don't really look good at all for psionium that gives us superpowers. The thing is, our brain is highly specialized to perform certain complex functions, and those certainly do not include sensors or effectors outside of our organism. What human's brain can control is limited to a body of that human, and there are no known ways for physics, chemistry or biology that would permit brain activity to read and/or influence some other brain's activity, or displace objects at the distance, or see future, or anything. That's not what the brain does, and it won't do that, regardless of amount of magic crystals or wonder liquid you will pump in it. The best you can hope for in reality is improvement in cognitive abilities that may or may not bring heavy hangover the next day. Can our thoughts have any effect on the immediate world outside us? Well, we can read brain electricity quite precisely with special science electrode caps, and thus create neuron-to-tech interface that does not even require eye or muscle use and gives human a lot of abilities. That, however, would qualify as MacGuffin rather than Unobtainium, and I gonna do a separate video on those someday, but for now we speak Unobtainium. So, sorry Lucy, but mental superpower psionium only gets cake tier. Computers are much luckier than us meatbags in that dimension, since future of digitronium generally looks bright. Even if room temperature superconductors will never get discovered after all, there is still Moore's law. Moore's law states that the amount of mechanical neurons in our computers doubles roughly around every 2 years. Moore's law has been generally proving to be true so far, and it might as well keep working in the foreseeable future, so digitronium earns its place in diamond tier after all. Another diamond tier unobtainium variety is Luxurium, because it has existed and will keep existing for probably as long as our civilization persists. Be it silk, spices, ivory, exotic pets, mind enhancers, gemstones, valuable papers, cryptocurrency coins, Luxurium as a concept had probably lived in our culture since the discovery of gold and will always live due to the general structure of human economics. We will always have some special material or substance that only the richest can have. That's just how the world of things and monies work. So, scientific hardness of Luxurium is actually not even in question, and I am only mentioning it to put a tick. There are 2 more ticks left, Handwavium and Mysterium, and these are both easy as well. For the sake of classification I'm using here, Handwavium was assigned a role of a wastebasket taxon. It is basically any weird, unusual unobtainium that does stuff that doesn't fit into the rest of categories. Handwavium can be diamond tier, and just as easy, it can be cake tier. Which means that each Handwavium case must be reviewed separately, so I can't really put it on the tier list here. As of Mysterium, the unobtainium whose main value is to be not yet known to science, well, modern physics actually have a plenty of those. There are substances whose existence science predicts, but either can't prove yet or is very unsure of how it works, like dark matter, dark energy, tachyons and white holes. There are also always chemical substances that we haven't yet discovered or synthesized and thus know nothing of them, so I guess there will always be some real-life mysterium as long as science exists itself. Speaking of harder sciences, sorry, my bad, we still have kinda half tick left, the transportalium. It is defined as a material that can provide at least one of the following: levitation, teleportation, faster than light travel, and time travel. We've established that room temperature superconductors can levitate, as well as can do certain magnetic and diamagnetic materials, but they all need some surface to levitate over, so it's more of a hovering actually. To achieve true anti-gravity, we need we need at least some reliable theory for starters, and modern science has little to none. There is actually a prize of 1 million monies for a reproducible anti-gravity experiment, which no one has claimed so far. As far as we know for now, anti-gravity might not even be technically possible at all, as most certainly impossible is teleportation. Teleportation stumbles upon such an array of physical, chemical, biological, ethical and cultural issues that I'd rather prefer not to open that can of worms for now. Things look slightly better for faster-than-light travel, since here we already have blueprints of highly hypothetical Alcubierre drive, which does interstellar travel ridiculously fast. To construct that, we will need to get something known as exotic matter. Exotic matter has negative energy density, or, speaking human, it has negative mass. That's actually very different from antimatter, which very much has mass, but is oppositely charged. If we manage to get some of that negative mass exotic matter, we might build Alcubierre drive and travel faster than light, or we can create wormholes and travel in time without violating too many laws of physics. The issue is, we are not really sure if exotic matter exists at all, and have little to no idea about where and how to look for it. That leaves exotic matter, and for that reason time travel and faster-than-light travel Transportalium in rubber tier of science fiction hardness at best. So yeah, there are a few disappointments, but the general perspective of the future technology looks good. Most of the substances we want to obtain are actually, at least technically, obtainable. It might be just a matter of time before one or more of these substances makes headlines in the news, but to be fair, a lot of them can still stay hypothetical for centuries or longer. Going back to science fiction, you might ask, so does that mean that any unobtainium from any of the diamond tier types is an indicator of hard sci-fi? My answer would be no, not at all. That's totally not the point I'm getting to. These positions of unobtainiums on the tier list are more of ceilings that they can hope for, and all of them, independently of subtype, can always fall deep into the fairy tale cake tier. Some authors bungle unobtainium by making its structure or functions be scientifically impossible or heavily hypothetical to the point of probable non-existence. It is also possible to mess up unobtainium origins and turn some stuff that should have been organic synthetic into inorganic naturally occurring. Authors can also mess up by making unobtainium be too many things at once, when it's convenient for the plot. In all the cases that seemed the most realistic so far, some amount of wonderful properties never went beyond 3. If some fictional unobtainium is at the same time durabilium, transportalium, psionium, digitronium, and size-change Handwavium, its science fiction hardness is certainly lower than if it tried to be just one or two of these things. In short, every notorious case has to be reviewed separately if we want to get to the roots of its scientific hardness, and that is exactly what I'm going to do in the next video. There are gonna be unobtainium from Avatar, vibranium from Marvel, kryptonite from DC, spice melange from Dune, and I still have space for a few others in the script, so I'm open to your proposals in the comments. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you don't want to miss the next one, subscribe, and see ya!